Welcome to episode 13 of the Edge Grip podcast. And with us today is the one and only industry giant and champion maker, Chuck Graves. Chuck, thank you so much for being with us today and taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Nabil. Yeah, thank you, Gal.
And Chuck, your nickname is the King of Willow, and you have to be really fast around Willow Springs and win enough races to get that nickname. How'd you get that nickname?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they gave me that nickname because maybe they thought they could beat me everywhere else. But that really was my my it was my backyard, my stomping ground, and it was really the place that I built my riding career and I built my company at Willow Springs. That was the track that you could go to twice a month. We had AFM, and we had what was called ARRA, which later became WSMC, and it was embraced by the owner, Bill Hughes, who bought back into the sport. It was close to the manufacturers in their backyard, and because it was fast, it was important. And this was all during the era of building new super sports bikes. Bikes were coming from being naked bikes to being fairing bikes and to look like road race bikes and perform like road race bikes. And the manufacturers would every year were amping up to be better. And at that time, the motorcycles hadn't outgrown the racetracks as far as performance. And Willow Springs being one of the fastest racetracks in the country, you could truly see the performance of the motorcycle over the others. And so it was the hotbed for where things were happening. And so I did a lot of riding at Willow Springs, and I won a lot of races. And I guess that name just stuck after some period of time.
You broke the lap
That's
record.
impressive.
Yeah, you broke the lap record. What bike did you use and what was it when you broke it?
I did it on a number of occasions, but it was with the first time we did that was with a GSXR 750 that we shoehorned a GSXR 1100 motor in the frame. And it was a hopped up 1100 motor. They called them 1100s. I think it was a 1098. And, back then a set of flat slides and a big bore and some camshafts would really make a bike rock. So, Bill Hughes had an idea that he didn't care about anything except how fast can a motorcycle get around my racetrack. And so Bill created this thing called Formula USA, right? And this was before it went national. And he got Toyota involved and other sponsors involved, and he made it no rules. He didn't care if it was a V8 with two wheels. That's what the race was going to be. And he put a lot of prize money behind it. And so as that developed, so did my skill set and I would say, bike building. And that became the beginning of building these really cool hybrid motorcycles for Willow Springs racing. But then that went national, and it was a really cool era, great era.
Rules just get in the way.
Yeah, they do. They do.
I
So
mean, being named the fastest guy on the fastest track in the US is a pretty impressive feat.
yeah,
This is unbelievable. And it's kind of sad. It's sad, but you also have to do it, right? Because I remember World Rally Championship, same thing. They had the Group A where there was no restriction, right? And so the companies that had the bigger budget and they start going crazy with engines, and the cars became almost too fast and too dangerous. And also it limited the entrance, although you can put new entrants in different category and have them race against each others, but they banned it. And so you could only get Group B after that, and there was tons of rules around limiting the engines. And I guess it happened in the motorcycling world too, because even with this, I mean, we have MotoGP, but they have rules around it. I can only imagine how fast bikes would be if they had a no rule type of racing today.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, MotoGP is almost no rules, right? And there's some rules to balance out what the manufacturers can do and what the tire manufacturers can do. but they've really, I mean, they're pretty hands off. I mean, but all of the really cool aids that they have, including the aerodynamics and stuff today, really getting around the racetracks pretty fast, maybe too fast still.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
it still has to be a 1000 cc bike. It can't be 1500.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, well, I guess you're right. Okay. So they would be much, much faster. Maybe they'd have to be supercharged 2000 cc. That would be
Right.
pretty cool. I think I'd like that. I'd like to
Yeah,
see
I don't know
that.
how you would
Yeah.
ride this, but
I don't know where you get a
maybe they
tire
need an
that's big.
autopilot.
I see.
Yeah.
I see your wheels turning. I see your wheels turning. Are you going to go back to the shop and build one?
Yeah. Well, Kawasaki has this really cool supercharged bike. And I keep looking at it thinking that would be so cool to make a road race bike out of it and see what you could actually do. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be pretty cool.
Actually, I think somebody rode it at Fontana about a year or 2 years ago. I'll get to send some details about this, but they did a pretty decent time considering, the long straights there. And I can't remember if it was Tony Elias or who did that, but
Oh, is
I
that right?
remember in the
Tony
film.
Elias wrote it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Well, you
was
need to
pretty cool.
take it from it being the street bike and make it the actual race bike platform. Get the tires and suspension and all the bits and pieces on it, right? Maybe some electronics that could balance out the power output so that the wheel stays on the ground and that the tire stays on the rim,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
that would be a pretty cool bike to build. Bimota actually, so they're using Kawasaki engines, and Gal will tell us all about Bimota in a minute. But
I haven't gotten it yet. I'm
uh,
still waiting. But
has
Bob
it been
said,
45 days?
yeah, well, Bob said they're currently testing it. So they're actually testing the shifter, and the shifter is going to work right. They're going to ship it over, and if the shifter is not going to work right, then they're going to make another one. So hats off
So
to them
yours
for
has
testing.
the yeah, that's nice actually. So you don't have to be the guinea pig. But yours is the standard like 1100, and I think that Bimota took the what's called the H2R engine and put it in a bike that has a better chassis, isn't it?
hmm,
No, mine's the
hmm.
KB4. So the KB4 has the Z1000 engine. It doesn't have the supercharged
Yeah.
engines. Then they have the Tezzy, and that Tezzy has the supercharged engine.
Okay, it's a Tesi that they did with that
Yeah,
engine.
Hmm,
yeah.
hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
although not
well,
a race chassis, but they have good chassis in Bimota.
Well, the
hmm.
Tezzy's got
Yeah,
that
yeah,
front swing arm. What do you call it?
Yeah, the telelever.
No, it's not Teleliver. Teleliver is the BMW one. They have their own mechanism that's a front swing arm with a way
Yeah,
for the front hub to move around. So I'm not too sold on that. But I got the KB4 because I like the way it looked. It looked like a cafe racer. It's a street bike. And then for the track, I have what Kerry built for me. So anyway, you built in 1988 GSXR 750,
right.
which I actually owned back in the day, and that bike almost killed me. But that's a different story.
Hmm.
How did you find the 88 versus the 86/87? And what exactly did you do to your 88?
So I think the big challenge was when they went from the 86, 87 platform to the 88 platform. The frame was more rigid, the steering head angle was steeper, the seating position was more aggressive. The valving and the forks were probably it was actually a cartridge type fork, where before they had old school sort of dampening rod, and the older frame flexed a lot more, and it was all of those things made it a lot easier for the average guy to set up. So they went to the 88, and it became this race bike that took some experience to set up, and so that challenged a lot of folks, and that was the big difference. And also, if we're talking about the 750 engine, the 750 they changed the bore and stroke, and so they took a lot of the torque away and they put a lot more RPM up. At that time, it was short stroke motor, and it had really poor port velocity. So it was a lot of guys had challenges making it run too. It wasn't that the other stuff was pretty easy to make run, and this one was harder to make handle and harder to make run. And so I think that hurt him a little bit in that transition, right? The 1100, I want to say the 1100. Did it change in 88? Or was that 89 that it changed?
So 89 then went to
they
the
went
one
to
that
89,
had
yeah.
looked like the 715 and I think 143 horsepower engine stock.
Yeah, and I think we used I believe we used the 87 motor. They were big bored into the 88s. But 88 was I think that was the first year that Formula USA went national. I can't remember. Is that right?
I don't remember.
It's been a long time ago. No, it might have been. Yeah, and I think it was 88. I want to say it was 88, the first year that. No, maybe 89. Maybe it was 89. Anyways, yeah. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. A little lost there.
So what exactly did you do to it? I know my standard one had some issues that they fixed in 89. But then the 89 models also had the same fundamental turning issue that was lack of lean angle. You would just grind everything.
You found that you had a lack of lean angle and with the 88, 89 versus the earlier model.
Yeah.
So I think that the center of gravity was a little low at with that unit, and you needed to raise the bike up a bit, and you needed to get some trail in it. And when the CG is low, you have to lean it over a lot further. And so, because I don't think the motors were any narrower, right? We used to do a lot of things to narrow up the motors. We'd pull the stators off, and we'd machine the bottom of the cases and weld them, tighten the flat plates on there and put more ground clearance in them. But I think that was part of the issue too, was the CG was a little low, but if you raised up the bike, you don't have to lean it over as far to get it to go through the corner at the same speed.
Okay.
So that was one of the many things that I would have done.
The standard one had, I think, 112 horsepower. How much did yours have?
With a 1100 motor in it?
Yeah. I'm afraid to ask.
Oh, I want to say there's a gentleman by the name of Mike Weimer. I don't know if you know that name. Mike Weimer was he was the guy who ran the dyno at Kirker when it was in Canoga Park, and which became Kirker Super Trap. And I did my dyno work with Mike, and I learned a lot about the internal tuning of the engine during that era with Weimer. And I want to say on the Kirker dyno, it was about 165 horsepower. I don't know what that equates to a rear wheel dyno these days, but it was pretty fast. It was a missile.
So basically, it had the same amount of power that its standard, I think, Ducati V4 has today in the rear wheel when you take it out of the store.
So with no electronics. Yeah, with no electronics, right? And it was interesting because you had, thinking about that in that era, we had round slide carburetors, right? And the round slide carburetors, when you had an engine that made a lot of it had a lot of vacuum, let's say, when you'd shut the gas, the slides would stick, right? And going from closed to back open was really, really difficult because it would be stuck. And then once you put enough effort to get it moving, then you'd overcompensate with your wrist to get it to move. And, figuring out the little things was one of the things I was really good about on the mechanical side, maybe better than actually being a rider. But so what I did was I took the carburetors and put them out of sync. In other words, I had the slides in different levels, so it would sound really funky, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was almost like a form of engine braking and traction control for that era. So by putting the slides at different levels, I could had less of the engine decel going into the corner, and I had a smoother transition coming back onto the gas.
Essentially a
Right.
big bang engine.
Well, not such a big bang, but say, think about it like this. When you had a motor like that and all of a sudden you shut it off, all 4 cylinders die, right? And now the bike's wagging and it's heavy on the nose going in. And when you crack it on, and it wants to take off. So what I would do is I would make it go from a 4 cylinder to a 3 cylinder to a 2 cylinder to then go from a 2 cylinder to a 3 cylinder to a 4 cylinder, leaving the corner.
Okay.
I did it with the slides, right?
Yeah.
And it also made the throttle less sticky, right? And I built the cam and the throttle, which I sell that cam throttle today for cable operated motorcycles. Because people love them, right? Because at the bottom part of the ramp is you can move the hand the most and hardly anything happens, which is always when you're on the smallest part of the tire, when you're leaned over, right? So if you're going into a corner that's bumpy and your hands, the bike's moving around, it's really hard to be a surgeon, right? So I make these cam profiles in the throttle tube so that it was really small in the beginning. It also gave me a lot of leverage over those slides, right? And um, but it also only moved it a little bit, so the power change was very small. So it would give it that time for the tire to get down to the ground, relax, and bite the pavement before I start to pick it, because you can't steer until you get the gas on, right?
Yeah.
So once you just crack it the slightest amount, then you can begin to turn, right? And get the thing pointed where you want it to go. You start to pick it up, and then you could give her all 165 to the rear wheel, right? Sideways off the corner. So I had a lot of little tricks like that, and I was always really good at figuring stuff like that out.
That's
In that
brilliant.
So
era,
that was engine mapping. That was engine
that would have.
mapping before electronics and computer ever existed.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go
That's
back to that
awesome.
era, no one would have been thinking about stuff like that. Guys would say, "Oh, just turn the idle up," right? Okay, well, yeah. So, anyways, yeah,
To
that's a little bit of the stuff we did.
to everybody that listens,
But it listen.
the main difference between carburetor and fuel injection is the fact that in a carburetor there's something called a Venturi effect, and the faster the air flows through the carburetor, the more gas gets sucked up from the jets. In an injection, we just have a computer that injects the fuel into the air. So really, that's the main difference. You working through the physics of it, or letting the computer decide how much you get. So that's why I'm a big fan of carburetors still.
They're very smart, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're smart for what they are, right? But fuel injection is so much better. There's no gasoline on your hands, right? You don't have to take everything apart to make a change, right?
You don't need to choke it.
Right? You don't have to choke it. You can just, well, you sort of do. You set it up to do it, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then 89, you go national. The series Formula USA goes national, and all of a sudden you got all the big names coming up against you, and you did pretty well, didn't you?
I think so. I really, probably, it's probably too smart for myself. In other words, probably could have done better as a writer if I had found a way to work with other people who were doing it, other tuners, right? Say, because they could have brought me up a lot quicker. But I was always sort of doing my own thing, right? And sort of running my own program and trying to find my own sponsors and that was good. And I had the opportunity to, I think as the series developed, I had the opportunity to work with other people. But in the early years, yeah, I would say I did really, really good. Yeah.
I think I saw videos of you beating Colin Edwards and competing against Nick Einach and a lot of big, heavy names out there that
Yeah.
you beat on your own
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I actually won the first two nationals for Formula USA in would have been, I guess it was 1989, right? So 89, we won the one at Willow Springs,
Yeah.
and then we won the one at Portland. Oh yeah, that's what it was. It was a disaster. I got to tell you this story because this is a little interesting. So, things were very bright. I won those two nationals. That was a big thing for me. And I had this great sponsor, Fifth Avenue Seltzer. It was one of those, this bike that was, we did graphics back then where it was just the whole motorcycle was Fifth Avenue Seltzer. It was really cool. And I had the opportunity to go to Suzuka for the 8 hours. And so I went there and I did that. Back then it was usually you and a mechanic, and that's what you had, or a helper of some kind. That's how you went to the racetrack. And the mechanic that I worked with, we had been friends for a few years and when I got this chance to go to Suzuka, he really wanted to go. And they wouldn't pay for an additional person to come to Suzuka with me. And so I went ahead and went on my own and took that opportunity. Which was a great experience for me. But when I came back, he was so hurt that he quit.
Oh.
And yeah, which was really sad because we're great friends. It just really hurt. And the worst part about it is that he took the bikes completely apart, all the way, the motors, all the way to the ground. So when I got back, I had only like 4 or 5 days to get ready to go to the next national. And now I really don't have an established person to work with, but I was a good mechanic. So I had to put them back together myself. And so in that time, that era, my backup bike was a 750 super sport bike. So you could make contingency money on that and use it as a backup if something happened to your primary bike. So I got them both back together. And I got a 16-year-old kid to come with me. I was 20 or 21, or I don't remember what age I was at the time. But so we set out a day late, and I had no sleep for 2 days, putting the bikes back together. And we were driving. We were going to have to drive day and night, and we were still going to be late for the first practice. Right? That's what we figured. And he fell asleep at the wheel in Winslow, Arizona. Totaled out the truck, totaled out the trailer, both motorcycles, everything scattered across the desert. Right. So in the middle of the night, I wake up and it's like everything is just scattered. Done. That was the end of the program. So we went home. Managed to get what junk was left over, and I had a job at the local Suzuki dealership as a mechanic when I wasn't off racing, and so I just went back to work and licked my wounds and figured I'd try it again the next year.
That's the story of
ended
racing.
Yeah, it was a tough deal for me.
Yeah,
pretty much because everything I had built and owned was tied up in that truck and trailer and those bikes. And so it was I still had my toolbox, right?
That's all you need.
I still have my toolbox at the dealer, right? So I got back to work and ground it out again.
And it turned out it was worth it, grinding it out.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't change a thing. I've loved every moment of the highs and the lows, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's what builds your character, right?
Yeah.
Not about really how you come back up really that matters.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Tell us about
going get stuff, no doubt.
Tell us about Big Papa, the legendary Big Papa.
So, well, you got to remember the Big Papa thing comes from Yoshimura, right? That was really Yosh did some stuff, and Yoshimura had built these 750 1100s as well, right? I think that, I don't know, I'm not going to claim who did it first, right? But so after that era, or at least that 89 and 90, I got some support from Burt's Motorcycle Mall. They loaned me a couple of bikes, and I just focused on earning money at Willow Springs, right? And so I got like 600, 750, 1100. And the deal I'd make is I'll give you back the bike at the end of the year. We'll sell them, and we'll split whatever profit is in it. And I'd get the sponsors to help with the parts. And so that went really well in 90. And then at the end of 90, Yoshimura offered me for 91 to ride their bike at Willow Springs. And they allowed me to build my bike over in their shop. So I had now established a new mechanic and I that worked together, a guy by the name of Tom Martin. We built up the bikes in the program again, and we would go down to Yosh. We'd drive from the valley to Yoshimura, and that's where we would build the bikes. And I'd do the engines, and he'd do the chassis stuff. And so I got the opportunity to ride Yoshimura's bike at the next Formula USA at Willow Springs that year, which was Big Papa. And that would have been the first year that Kenny Roberts brought the 500 Grand Prix bikes. And so during that era, the Super Sports and Superbike and Formula USA, there was AMA Pro, which was beginning to do well, but Formula USA really brought television back to the United States road racing scene. The AMA was defunct, and they looked and said, what is Formula USA doing? And the teams and money started to gravitate that direction. They had to fix it somehow. And they did their things over at the AMA, but there was also rival teams looking for budget. So John Ulrich at that time was running an endurance team in Wera, and he was one of the big dogs in the Formula USA series. And then, and with Suzuki budget, and over in the AMA Pro Racing was Yoshimura, and they did Superbike and Super Sport with Suzuki budget. And I was working over at Yosh building these bikes, and then taking that equipment and knowledge base over to the Formula USA and beating up on the Valvoline Suzukis and we beat them up good, right? And then they just, because it was really just our bikes and the 500 Grand Prix bikes in that era. And so it was a really successful year, a great year, had a great time. And so that's the Big Papa story. The end of the Big Papa story goes that at the end of 1991, we had a great season, and Yoshimura had said, hey, look, we want to do this again. It was fantastic. We loved it. And so we planned to do it. But about 30 days before the first race, they called up and said, hey, we're not going to be able to do this again. And, I thought, this is very odd. I've had a great relationship with these guys. Why would they want to just stop this all of a sudden? And I couldn't figure it out. And so I had to bring the equipment back that we had borrowed from him. And that's it.
That's
I
it.
had nothing.
That was it.
30 days. That was it. Done. Right? Imagine a racer who's put his whole career into doing this, and he's got nothing. Right? He had nothing happening. He had planned his whole season, everything he'd done. All of a sudden, now he got nothing. So about 2-3 days later, after I've returned all the equipment and everything's great, John Ulrich calls me up, says, hey, you looking for a ride? And I'm like, wow, there's the savior, right? Okay, yeah, absolutely. What have you got? So that was the end of the Big Pop era. And we started racing and doing stuff with what was then the Team Hammer's Valvoline Suzuki team.
And how did you do on the Valvoline?
It was pretty good. It was a good era. I learned to work with other crew chiefs and not build my own bikes. And for some of the stuff, it was really difficult because I knew if there was something that wasn't what I thought it should be, it was very difficult to say that because that's somebody else's work. So I really had to change my whole thought process to be a rider and not think about the technical aspect of the bike, but rather just tell them what was good and what was bad about the bike and what I needed to. So it was. I would say it was a good experience for me that gave me the opportunity to keep a group of bikes back at my workshop to continue doing the Willow Springs stuff and then do the national stuff for John and his team, and that was pretty good. We won a national championship and had some good times and met some great people, and it was I would say it was a good experience.
And then 1990, everything changes, right? You tell, I think, your brother, "Hey, let's open our own shop."
Well, so that's in '90. I had already started Chuck Race Racing, right? Which that was when I was building the stuff and doing the racing. So the Ulrich thing happens. That's all the way up into '92. But between 90 and '92, I've already established this shop. But it was at that time when we started doing this stuff with the Valvoline in '92 that the shop became a facility for the California Highway Patrol, which is, you're going to go, what's that mean?
Yeah,
right? So I had some friends that were highway patrolmen, and they rode motorcycles, and I had worked with a few of them, a little bit of training. They had some police Olympics they did out at Willow Springs, and a lot of the police officers would, come and do the police Olympics. And I think it was California Superbike School are the bikes they rode in that competition, the police Olympics. And so I got the opportunity to meet a bunch of those guys. So they would stop by this workshop that I had. And that's where Graves Motorsports started, right? It starts in '90 as just a hobby shop and, and a place to work on my race bikes. But now I've got these friends that are highway patrolmen, and the shop is right off the 405 freeway, right? And 405 and, the shop's on Balboa and Satakoy, which is basically 405 and say Sherman Way.
Okay.
Right?
What is this, Van Nuys City? Is this Van Nuys?
No, it's Van Nuys.
Okay.
It's Van Nuys, yeah. And so it was actually, the shop was right, I don't know if you know that by the name of Matsu. There was a guy by the name of Matsu who worked with Yoshimura, and he had his own shop called Escargot, like a snail. And when I was a kid, I would ride my bicycle over there and watch this guy hand make pipes. This is before Yoshimura became who they were. He would fill these pipes with sand and weld them shut, and then hand bend and heat them. And it was just the most amazing thing for me. I loved watching this guy do this, but it was actually right next door to Matsu's old shop. But so I'm going a little bit off track here. So, and I've got this shop in Van Nuys, and the high patrolmen are coming every day, and we had a little lounge for them, and Monday Night Football, and hey, babe, and they could go write a report or whatever and hang out and talk. It just turned into, could we leave some brake pads here? What if we got a flat tire? And we would be there. We'd do 12, 14 hours just because it was a hobby shop, right? So it could be 7, 8, 9, 10, midnight. We'd still be at the shop. And so they would just show up if they're out on a ride. They'd swing by and say hi and hang out for a bit. And we ended up with a contract servicing 4 divisions of the California Highway Patrol. And that's what really started Graves Motorsports. So that I could hire technicians to have them there. My brothers would run it. And the Highway Patrol could stop in, get a flat fixed, get brakes changed, oil, whatever. And because it was a hobby shop, they always come first. And that was our pitch to the state that, hey, look, you're not going to have an officer down when they got a vehicle, because it used to be they'd have to drop it off at a dealer or take it to the motor shop, right? And so if you had to drop it off at a dealership, it took 2 officers out because one had to go pick him up and take him back to the office. And then he'd still have to get a ride there and back. So it just saved them an immense amount of time. And we were able to get them product at a great price and give them great service. And so we did that for a number of years. We used that to earn the money along with the stuff that we did at Willow Springs, to earn the money to buy machines and get Graves Motorsports started. We started manufacturing hard parts for the bikes and doing dyno work, and so that's how that started. All during the racing time too. So I had all that energy.
I bet you also never got a speeding ticket.
Well, if anybody ever let me go, I won't admit to it. But they did. It's interesting because those 4 divisions covered the area around the Rock Store and Angeles Crest. So because we had Altadena and Westlake were part of it. So a lot of great guys, let's say.
So you had it covered. That's great. I guess you didn't sleep much either.
I'm a high energy guy. I like to get stuff done, and I really don't like sitting around much.
Speaking of,
if I wasn't, go ahead.
Speaking of earning money in Willow Springs, you hold the record, right?
Well, so that, yes, and I'm not sure where that stands today, but with WSMC out for the funds that they output, it was I made a living there, and that gave me the opportunity to build my company from racing at Willow Springs. Told you that was the hotbed. There was an era when we could make about $15,000 a weekend at a club race. And that would be tire money, manufacturer contingency, sport company contingency, and the funds from Willow Springs. And that would feed us and put money back into the coffer of the company. So it was, I'd say we did very well. I got to thank Bill Hughes for that in Willow Springs.
So the stats I saw was it's a statement that was issued in 2003. So obviously not the end of your reign there, but it was about $100,000 made just with WSMC contingency money.
Right.
And my record stands on minus 30,000 over there.
Yeah.
So I paid, and you
good.
got paid.
Well, that's what you spent was 30,000. Oh, okay. Well, that you got off cheap, huh?
Yeah, and in today's money, that's like $1 million, right? With inflation.
Yeah.
Well, I would actually go down between Saturday and Sunday back to Carrie's shop. He would wait for me, put tires on, and then I would go back up there. But yeah, I'm not good at racing.
So Chuck, how do you manage a racing career at the same time as running a shop and building parts? I mean, that's like 3 jobs for 3 humans, and you did it all yourself.
Well, no, I didn't. I had my brother. There's actually 5 of us total, and we're all in business at one time or another in different types of businesses. But my younger brother, Tom, he came in and he did a lot of the logistics and the organizing. And, I've had a lot of great people work for me and around me and with me over the years. So I'd say, one set of hands can only do so much, right? But a mind can do a lot. So wheels never stop turning. Let's just say that. And the motorcycle racing part, once you became, at least at that era, when you were so hands-on, to all of a sudden have to take your hands off the vehicle, it was such a change for me. It was, I would say it was easy. It was easy. So,
and then
I shouldn't say it's easy, but it was easier for me.
Looking back, everything's easy, right?
Right. There were plenty of struggles. Yeah.
Switch back to 1997, the first AMA Pro race as a team owner. Graves GSXR 750 and GSXR 900, which not exactly a standard model, is it?
No, and so you'd asked about that 900. So that was really GSXR 750, and they came out with a motorcycle called an RF 900, which used a lot of similar internal engine parts as the GSXR 750.
Right.
So I took the GSXR 750 chassis and the superbike transmission and camshafts and the bits and pieces and intermixed all those to make a GSXR 900, which was just a missile. And we reset the lap record at Willow Springs with that bike. It was a great bike. Even all the way back in that era, we had carbon fiber gas tank. It was about 312 pounds, I think, the bike.
Wow.
Very light. And so it was so light that when I took it to that 97 AMA race, I really didn't realize that AMA Pro Racing had rules. I thought Formula Extreme was Formula Extreme. So we showed up with this bike.
Forget rules.
And right. Well, I thought it was Formula USA. So we show up with this bike, and immediately Mark Miller was riding the bike for us. It was immediately as fast as the Arian Hondas, and that had those guys just up in arms. Like Kevin Arian was not happy about that because there was a nobody that was just going to show up and he was had a shot at winning the race. And so after qualifying, they weighed the bikes, and I thought, why are they weighing the bikes? Hey, King Bang, oh, wait a minute, you're way too light. I go, okay, well, sorry, I didn't know, right? Because I never looked at the rule book. I just wanted to show up with what we had, and so it's the thing that really irked me, though. I'll tell you this, is that they disqualified us from qualifying. I said, okay, so we get to start in the back of the grid and we'll add some weight to the bike. They go, no, you don't get to start. I'm like, well, why can't we just put the weight on? No, you don't get a provisional start. And for me, that was really kind of odd, right? But it's okay. I licked my wounds. We went home, backed it up, and then I got a phone call from Tom Houseworth, right? And Tom Houseworth was running the Yamaha road racing team at the time, and Tom Houseworth was he was actually a crew chief of mine at the Valvoline Suzuki team in one of the years. I want to say the year actually we won the national championship, right? In '93, we won Formula USA, and Tom was the crew chief, and he built all my GSXR 600, 750, and 1100s for the Suzuki Cup races. And he said, hey, look, and he and I, we'd had a relationship because when he built the bikes, he didn't, he did everything. And he always thought it was kind of odd. Even the bikes that I use out of Willow Springs, I'd ask him to build. He goes, but I had a shop and I was building my own engines. And he'd always say, why are you having me build them when you can do it yourself? Like, Tom, you're the guy, it's your job, you do your thing, but I got to stay busy. So that's why I do it, right? So, anyways, Tom knew of my skill set. We were good friends, and so he said, "Hey, look, we got this new motorcycle coming, right? It's called an R1, and we want you to campaign it in Formula Extreme for us in the next year. We can get you this in a couple of parts. Do you want to do it?" And I go, absolutely. I mean, that's the greatest thing that ever happened for me. I was thinking, this is fantastic. And that started the era for us with Yamaha. So we went from, we were with the R1 all the way to its death, right? To where it is now, which is probably the last model they'll ever make. Certainly the R6 has been finished. So anyways, but pretty cool. 21 years of doing that.
Did it blow your mind, the bike, when it came out?
Well, it was the leapfrog, right? From where, we had these set-up bikes with the handlebars that were up, the kind of Lawson replicas and those types of things, naked bikes, to fairing bikes. And then came the R1, which was the next, really the next evolution. And yeah, I would say it did. It was the hottest thing since sliced bread, right? It really was. The R1s were just dominant machines from that. All and they still are still a great bike.
Yeah, yeah. They were by themselves, I think, for a year until year or 2 years. When did Suzuki came out with the GSX-R 1000? 2000 or 2001?
No, no, they were making GSX-R 1000 for quite a lot of years, but they needed to up the ante, right? They really needed to up the ante, and the R1 was light and it was well put together. And we see this happen every now and then in the industry, where whoever the project leader for this whatever this new model that might be developed, they get a project leader that is very race oriented, and you can tell when you look at a motorcycle, how mature the project leader, and you're going to obviously have the technical leader, and you're going to have the administrative leaders, right? The bean counters that probably all weigh in on this, but you can tell that group and their experience level in the unit comes out by how a motorcycle is put together, its price point, right? A lot of things, but the R1, across the board was simplistic, was fast, it was a race bike with lights, more like the early model GSX-R 750s in 86, 87, before they started, adding a lot of stuff that wasn't really necessary, or secondary thoughts. And you could tell when those project leaders changed, right? When, like you said, about 86, 87 was one way, all of a sudden 88 is something different, right? Well, there's other influences at that time.
And then 92.
So
yeah, 92, I don't even want to think about it, when they
right,
moved to
right.
water cooled.
So you could tell that this group was really good, right? Very race oriented. And I wouldn't know about the administrative side at that era, but that was the new thing that was going to be happening for the future for sport bike. And everybody else followed suit with these types of units.
Yeah, I think it replaced the Thunder Ace. Remember that bike?
No, FZR 1000.
Yeah,
It replaced.
the Thunder
Yeah,
Ace
FZR
looked
1000.
like a big
Yeah, a Thundercat.
fish. Was it Thundercat
Yeah,
or Thunder Ace?
Thundercat. I think that was the 600 they called the Thundercat or whatever it was. But FZR 1000 was the machine before that.
Okay.
Right. They did have OW1, which was the 750, right? But this was changing. Everything was going 1000, right? That's what people were thinking,
Yeah.
right? What year did Superbike change from 750s to 1000s?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's a little bit vague for me too.
Yeah.
But it was still 750 at the time.
I drink a
As I
lot of
recall.
soda, so I can't remember much.
Well, we'd have to go back and look a little bit of history there, right?
Yeah, and then in the middle they had the Fireblade, which came out at 900 at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was super light
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah. Very simplistic. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot, that's the way I look at that new ZX4RR. It's you could tell that group was very mature all the way across the board. Now, with my experience, I can tell when the administrative is good too, right?
Yeah.
And so anyways, it was really cool to see all that come about, and that really gave me the opportunity to just really show our talents, right?
Yeah. And then you start running Yamaha teams in AMA, and you become, the important figure you are today to the industry. Less of a rider, more of a team manager slash the Yamaha R1 parts guy. And then I saw a little video, and I read a little story that in 2004, as a team manager, you decide to do a press day just to showcase your motorcycles. And it just so happened to be on the small racetrack called Willow Springs.
Right.
And then you put your suit on, and you go for a few laps with your riders. And your rider is who was that guy? One of the Goberts?
Yeah, that was Aaron Gobert, right? Yeah.
And did he after those 2 or 3 laps, did he come back and just go back to the trailer and didn't come out for a couple of
I
days?
think he was. Yeah, I think he was quite surprised, but yeah. Well, I would say no. I had the mechanics pull one of his spark plug caps before before we rolled out, so I could beat him.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
No, but I should have, huh?
It looked like that.
Right.
It's not a good day that your team manager beats you on a racetrack, but I guess he didn't know who he was racing against.
He did, but he hadn't ridden with me before.
Were there journalists there that were like, "Whoa, wait a minute"?
Yeah, there was quite a few guys there. I don't remember all of the shenanigans that went along with it, but Aaron's a great guy. And I have to tell you, it was one of the guys I was really close to as a rider. Right, it was really a lot of fun, and yeah, just a good experience, great experience with him.
For you. Okay, so the next bullet point is Graves owned the title of being the only person to ever had a bike banned from the AMA. Tell me about that. You have a history of combining motorcycles together. GSXR 1100 to 750 to 900. This one was an R1 / an R7. So how did that idea come about, and what do you do to that bike?
So this was, I would say the peak of the builder era for superbikes and 1,000cc motorcycles in America. Yamaha, they were still racing superbikes. They were 750s. They had an R7, which had a lot of really cool bits and pieces on it. Our Yamaha support had gotten, better and better. And here it was 2001, I believe it was, that we built the first R7-1. And we had a really great rider, Damon Buckmaster and Aaron Gobert, both riders. Aaron was actually injured the first year. He got injured at Daytona. And in that era, the Formula Extreme bikes did not run at Daytona. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the lap times and the speeds were much faster than that of the super bikes. And they could go 200 miles an hour even back then. And so they just didn't want those bikes there. So they would always start the second round. And so Aaron got injured in Supersport, doing Supersport for Yamaha. So he wasn't able to ride, so we only had Damon. And we spent that year, 2001, developing that motorcycle. And we won 5-6 races, maybe half of the races with Damon. We didn't win them all, but we finally found a package that was really, really good. Aaron came back maybe the last 2 races of the year and found his footing again, because he almost died at Daytona. He crashed and got run over on the banking, and it's quite a big deal. And so come 1992, this bike was just dominant. And the AMA, when we set out to build this bike, we went with Yamaha to the AMA and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to build. We're going to spend our budget. And we plan to do this over this period of time. Right. And so even for Graves Motorsport, it was, even with the support of the factory, it was still a lot of work to do this. And so we built out parts and equipment, and we had to amortize it over 3 years. But by the second year, the bike was so dominant that you could put it on the front row of a superbike race. And that was really upset a lot of the other teams and manufacturers. And we won the first 3 races, and they came back to the AMA and they protested the bike. They used a rule saying that the bike was supposed to be street legal. And in fact, they allowed it to be raced in Superbike, the R7, they said for Formula Extreme, they used it as an argument when it really wasn't a fair argument, and it took Suzuki actually pushed Honda to get both groups together to go to the AMA and say that this bike should be outlawed. And so I'm thinking to myself that, this is never going to happen. We're just forging forward. And at Road America, we had a test at Road America. And I remember this very specifically. It was probably a 3-day drive for the tractor and trailer to get from Road America back to our shop in Van Nuys. And then it was I believe it was Memorial Day weekend. It was a 4-day holiday. And then the next week we would have to be at Steamboat Springs. No, not Steamboat Springs, but Colorado Springs for the next AMA race. And they have that, I forget the name of the circuit, but it was in Colorado Springs. It was some circuit track there. And we got the AMA held all these meetings and said, okay, you can't come back with that bike. So it was, I couldn't believe for the life of me that not only had my company had invested all this time and energy, that somebody could actually use a pencil to turn a ruling over where the AMA had already allowed us to do this and spend this money. And in hindsight, if I look back at it now, I should have taken him to court. Right?
It
was really, 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 really pretty dirty on their part. But we could not come back with the same motorcycle. We had to build a completely different bike.
Yeah, it was pretty shady, and I remember reading an article that Chris Ulrich wrote about it, and he was like, "Look, how can you allow a bike and then decide that it doesn't fit there anymore? Right. Not exactly fair and not exactly legitimate." So those days, I think those days were pretty shady with a lot of backroom deals. But that being said, I think that what we have today with MotoAmerica, those things don't exist. So as far as I know,
I don't think the politics are any different, to be honest.
Really?
It's just a different set of politics, right? It's racing it's a really, really tough business, and there's a lot of money on the line, and it doesn't. I haven't seen an era yet where there isn't some stuff that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah,
okay,
that's kind of what they're not the AMA, but I to be honest, I'm not sure why things are the way they are today or why they were back then, right? I can only speculate, but it's kind of a really bad deal for me back then. I really felt like we got penciled out of a championship. That wouldn't have been the only time that happened, right? It actually happened in 2005, right?
What happened there?
So, we won the championship in 2004 for the Formula USA. The Formula Extreme thing changed, right? They eliminated it, and we did stock 1000. That was our new job at the R1 when the new 04 came out. And I remember just being a fantastic era. First opportunity to go down and run at Daytona, stock 1000 bikes, and all 4 of our riders, Jamie Hacking, Jason DiSalvo, Aaron Gobert, and Damon Buckmaster, all came across the finish line, just all beside each other. This was an awesome race to win, and we won the championship in 2004 with the R1 against the Suzuki, the GSX R1000s and such. But in 2005, we had some challenges. I think some guys got hurt, but we still were in the fight. DiSalvo was in the fight for the championship when we recognized that the Suzuki guys were running Aaron Yates with a modified swing arm pivot, right? And the Suzuki had an interchangeable swing arm pivot, but you couldn't change those parts, right? You had to run the parts that came on the motorcycle. Mm-hmm. So we said, hey, this isn't right. You've got this. And they came back and said, nope, sorry. They sell that part through normal parts channel, and therefore he's allowed to use it. But that's not the way the rule was. So they did a backroom deal and gave him a pass. And I can tell you there were people that wrote this thing, and this is there's a lot of weird stuff happened at the AMA at that time. Patty DePietri was pseudo running this thing, and they convinced her that it was a safety thing.
Has nothing to do with safety. Well, why would it?
Swing arm angles, I wouldn't high side, right? So, okay, we all need that, right? But so they walked us out of a championship there, and DiSalvo narrowly missed the championship. Hacking was injured, and the other guys were injured, so kind of got walked out on that part. But Yates ended up getting the championship in 2005. I have to say it's pretty sad to see. That's okay. We came back the next year with the R1LE. We filled the podium every single weekend, just about, just with all three riders: DiSalvo, Hacking, and I forget who was the other guy, but then DiSalvo, Hacking, and who would have been the third guy that year?
I don't remember. Gobert.
Yeah, no, Eric Bostrom.
Oh, okay.
Eric Bostrom. Yeah,
we had him. We had him on the podcast.
Oh yeah. Love that guy. Yeah. Love that guy. Love them both. Ben's a great dude too. Forgot all about those. Having the opportunity to work with those guys. Great dudes.
He's an animal, man. I picked him up. In Vegas. He had a broken rib and he walked like 2 miles in the morning just because before I picked him up. And
really?
And I was like, you getting out of bed with a broken rib?
Yeah,
you should see the bicycle rides they do. 3,000 feet elevation, 8 hours, 200 miles.
Yeah.
And that's before breakfast.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Those guys, both of them are just incredible athletes, right? And very humble, both of them too. I love that about those guys.
Now, Chuck, it looks like you're
ready. I
ready.
had the opportunity to ride with them in. They used to have a house in Temecula, and there's a flat track there. And they ride like beasts, right? And will run around circles around everybody, including some professional racers. I would say, except JD Beach, who was pretty good at a flat track. But their dad, back then 74 years old, would come out in the afternoon and beat them up.
Oh, really?
Which was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Chuck, my dad never beat me up.
Chuck, it looks like you're ready for another championship just by looking at you. All that, all that what's bottled up inside. Are you about to take a ZX10 and build a race team?
We looked at it really hard. We've looked at it really hard a couple of times, but I don't think that's in the cards. To be honest, I think. I think Superbike is going to change, and I say that because the unit sales I think are very small, right? And so it's not really that important. And racing is, at least when you're trying to get the support to do it, it's very expensive to do, and there's really only a few guys that can get a return on the investment in racing. And so a few things have happened. We sell less superbikes or street superbikes to the consumers today. So the budgets are much, much smaller, if any at all, to do it, to promote it. And usually when things are shrinking, if you're not trying to expand it, then you're trying to just
ride it to the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. You want to keep selling them. You have customers still want them, but it's not something you plan on expanding, and you have to move into the market. The customers already know who you are. And so it's shrinking. You're not putting energy, and you're putting your energy into things that you know are growing, right? And so if we couple that with, that takes the motorcycle manufacturer out of the game. A big part of motorcycle racing in the era that I did this was the tire manufacturer. And the tire manufacturer, on average, sells probably 10 sets of tires per motorcycle, which their profit from the sale of a motorcycle is pretty high. And so they want to build a customer base that continues to come back and buy that consumable, and they're reasonably expensive. So that's the next guy who stands to benefit the most. But that's in racing, that doesn't exist anymore, right? Everything's spec. So there's no support there either. And I would say that the organizations have driven the racing more towards an entertainment package where it's about the rider and not about the machine. In other words, with spec stuff and with balancing. And when you do that, it makes what we do less important. In other words, guys like me, right? If I work hard, you're gonna slow my bike down somewhere, right? So, and the guy who doesn't work hard gets concessions, right? Because he doesn't win. So, you make what we do unimportant, and therefore it has no value to us, or much less value. And so we take that whole part out of it. So now where do we actually draw from to get a return on the investment of what it costs to do this? To go do a superbike program today, to start it up and pay everybody as a professional team, probably talking $6.5 million to get it up and going for the first year, right? And inflation is here to stay. It's not going to get any cheaper, right? So I would say that's not going to happen. We've looked really hard at it. We've had some folks that have got a lot of energy and want to do it, but to put it all together and put something together that says it's at least a 3-year program, because that's what it takes, right? To come in and do this and make it right and have it professional. And I haven't found that right group of partners that's ready to spend that kind of money with the type of return that we're going to get from it. So I'd say that's probably not going to happen. We looked at it really hard, and we try every year, but the deadline for me is in June or July, right, for the following year, because that's the time frame it takes to actually get prepared and do it, and bring all the partners together. So we'll continue to look at it, but I think Superbike's got some big challenges. The funding from at least for the Japanese manufacturers, and here in the United States, or probably all the manufacturers, I really don't see them having the budgets to spend, right? And so I don't think that's going to be. I think most of their money is spent in MotoGP and World Superbike, and so most of that road race money, even though we sell a lot of motorcycles, we're the biggest market by dollars. We see the money is being spent in some other places, right? So, and I think they're struggling too, right? Maybe not MotoGP, but maybe some teams in MotoGP are struggling, but I think World Superbike, they're probably struggling too. So I think that's going to be a difficult lift, and it's sad to see, right? But America's got the lion's share of the budget for off-road racing, and they should. 85% of all the off-road motorcycles are sold here, right? So we should have the money to go racing, right? We should have the money to go sport bike racing too, but it's still, again, this thing has to be about selling motorcycles, right? It can't be about racing. And so if it's about good racing or balanced racing, why would you do it? You want to go prove, like when we started the conversation, we were talking about how this thing got built from the beginning, and the manufacturers were really pushing to prove their bikes were dominant ones out of Willow Springs way back in that era. That's still what they want today. But if they spend that money and do that, and then you take away their opportunity when they do well, I mean, no businessman would do that, right? But you, I won't, right? I'm happy to come and entertain it. I love motorcycle racing and being involved, but it's got to make sense too.
Yeah.
So I don't understand a little bit what the different approaches of different manufacturers. So yes, in general, bike sales have slowed down, but then you see Ducati, for example, doubling down on super bikes, and even their 800s that are now in 50s and almost 1,000. There's no mid-size bike. Suzuki and others are still in the 600. The Yamaha pulled out of the 600. You mentioned something earlier about the R1. I don't know what's happening there, but it sounds like it was something that may be ending. So it seems like different companies have making different bets on the market and where the market's going. And understanding some are going smaller displacement size, which seems to make sense to me. Kawasaki is still doing the entire range. It doesn't seem like what you're saying is the liter bikes not doing that well. Opposite side of the stream, Ducati's doubling down on the liter bikes and making them 1.1, 1.2 and crazy horsepower. So who's right? I mean,
Well, I think the guy who sells the most motorcycles, right, and really the guy who's right, who's having the best time, right, who's enjoying what they're doing, and the company that and the people that work there, that's who's right. But if we want to talk about, who's number one or who's selling the most, or when it comes to racing, who's right? Well, if I was to look at the teams in the paddock and look where their budgets are coming from, right, we're going to see they're coming from individuals. I think, right, and I think Yamaha still has a little bit of money in there, and Suzuki's got a little bit of money, but it isn't really the type of money that it takes to do it, right? So I think everybody's really struggling. And I think there's a few philanthropists that are putting money in. Ducati, the New York guy, I think, pays for the Ducati that Josh Herrin rides. And I think a gentleman, Mike Kiley, is paying for the Tytler's BMW. But he's paying for everything. Like, writing the check for it all. They're buying the parts, right? Mm-hmm. Buying the parts, buying the crew, right? So that's a very difficult thing to continue without getting a return on that investment. That's why I'm saying it. If it was a much smaller number, it was a couple $1 million instead of $6 million, right? I'd say probably the industry might be able to find a few things, but to be honest, where do you go to get that other industry? Some oil guys, right? Well, how much can you get there, right? So you have to go outside the industry. And so the influence that you're going to get a return on has to be pretty grand. Well, there's a lot of companies doing a lot of marketing and advertising out there. I just don't see, very difficult to get the mainstream to put up that kind of money for what we're doing, right? It's very difficult, at least in America.
Speaking of which, this is a bit of a left field question. Speaking of sponsors, like petrol companies, right? We're a big oil production country in general. Mm-hmm. Repsol, big sponsor of Honda. Petronas was doing motorcycles that, they got into car racing. I mean, you have oil business into racing significantly around the world. Nothing in the US. I've never seen Exxon or Mobil or Shell or anybody put a couple of dollars in well, at least as major sponsors. Why is that?
I can't answer that for sure. But what I do know is the way business operates in the United States is very different than the way business operates in the rest of the world. And so this much I'm sure of. And so I think we have more boards where decisions are made. There's money, and remember, money can get spent anywhere. If you and so I think the person who's signing off has to have a lot of horsepower to say this is where we're going to put this much money, right? And I think in a lot of places, maybe they have guys where the power is consolidated. They can make that decision and say that, and where the money's in the control of the money's in many more people's hands here. So that can be part of it. Maybe we just don't have a good enough pitch, but I suspect it's the former. Right?
That would actually make sense, yeah, because a lot of large companies in Europe are still family owned or individually owned. Yeah. They have boards, but you know who the person is making the decision. Whereas in the US, they're very prudent and it's consensus decisions in that case. That would make a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, we've had some come around, but that guys actually have the grit to and the resources to do it. When they get a real close look at it and what it's going to take, and I think a lot of times it's like, look, if I can get some partnership, I'll do it, right? And so you can get really close, but what does that partnership mean, right? And the numbers just so big, it's hard to get there. So I think I think motorcycle road racing in America still has life in it, right? I just don't know that it'll be in the form of superbike, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's really great. I just don't think we get the numbers, right? I don't think we get the numbers. That's my concern, and I think they've been struggling to get a good sized grid, and like I think you got to have the manufacturers back in, but I don't think you're going to get them back in when you have balanced racing. That's what I think. They need to be able to prove that their product is the best, right? Or at least have that opportunity. And I think that's the big challenge we have right now.
That's interesting because car racing, that still works, right? People who owns McLarens and Ferraris and Aston Martins are chatting after every F1 race and going like, my car is better than yours, type of discussions. But it doesn't seem to be happening in motorcycling the same way.
Do you know why?
Well,
It's because people that are young and have that kind of disposable income from crypto or whatnot, they'll buy a McLaren or a Ferrari and they'll advertise it, but they're not going to buy a motorcycle. So motorcycles are cool. It's just a question of showing how cool they are to everybody and increasing the market size. It's not about manufacture. If you want to sell more, everybody needs to get together and show young guys or young people how cool motorcycles are. Um, and I think that's why the decline is.
Yeah.
Yes, we had a surge in 2020. People went off road because they wanted to get out of the house. But people that actually think motorcycles are cool and want to put two or three of them in the garage, um, they're still affordable. I mean, even at $20,000, it's more affordable than what cars are. And it's just a question of showing everybody how cool they are, and whatever comes out of this industry needs to be done, I think, together, not manufacturer against manufacturer. At least until the market size goes back to what it used to be.
An observation that may or may not be entirely accurate. Uh, it looks like the industry is in kind of staring at its own navel. Because if I look at where, for example, motorcycle advertising happens, it happens in Road Racing Magazine. It happens in very specialized magazines that pertain to motorcycle. Very rarely do I open, let's say, a GQ or just kind of a general purpose magazine or any sort of publication or general TV where you see a motorcycle advertisement. It seems they're advertising to the same people who already have motorcycles, as opposed to try and get new people in the fold. And that's where maybe a big miss is, because people aren't getting exposed to how cool motorcycles are. I get excited sometimes when I see an ad where there's a cool person that's on a motorcycle, and you're like, okay, now we're looking cool again. But it's so rare, and that would happen to be an ad that has nothing to do with motorcycling, maybe a clothing brand. But it's super rare to look at a generic publication that targets women or targets young guys or targets older guys and actually advertises motorcycles.
well, look, think about the numbers, right? Because if we think about the numbers of people that will, females that will, or just people, let me say, I don't want to make this a gender thing, they would buy a purse, right? We got 350 million Americans that might buy a purse, right? But how many of them are going to buy a motorcycle? Let's talk about how many liter bikes they're selling. 1,000. So let's just say that the total number of 1,000 cc bikes, sport bikes. I don't want to wrap this into H2s, but real sport bikes, ones that are influenced by road racing, ZX10s, R1s, CBRs, Ducati Vs, RSV4s. Does it even reach 10,000 combined per year? If it does, I'm surprised. I think the number is a little bit less than that.
Wow.
There was just a few years back, they only sold 360 GSX-Rs, 1100s. So, so to spend the money to advertise the price point, just there's no match there. So they would have to co-brand with the person selling a purse using the motorcycle to make the purse look cool. And I think more of that these days would be done with something that is more mainstream, like a V-twin. V-twins are very popular. I could see the bagger racing in America. As a matter of fact, I would say that there's more full-time jobs in bagger racing right now than there is in superbike racing. I think there might be more money being spent right now in that. And you can just see the riders starting to gravitate over there. You can actually get a paycheck. There's probably more guys getting paid to ride baggers than there are getting paid to ride superbike. So I could see bagger racing being the most important thing in American racing. It's a little hands off. There's a lot more consumers. Matter of fact, I think some of their fan growth really comes specifically from that class.
Yeah.
Just how it is.
Which doesn't make
And
doesn't
those
make a
are
lot of sense to me, because when you go bagger racing, wouldn't you want to be on the machine that's the fastest? And the machine that's the fastest is a superbike. So you're taking machines that are slower just because they resemble, baggers, and baggers sell more, which makes people want to see their motorcycle on the racetrack.
Look, motorcyclists are so unique in itself. Just think of the numbers, right? Of motorcyclists that there are. And we want to be able to personalize our vehicles. If we can't personalize them, like if there's no accessories, we don't buy it. Or we might buy it, but we get rid of it pretty quick, right? We want to stand out in the crowd. And we want to be associated with others like us, right? And so they're super loyal. You walk around, you'll see guys with a tattoo, Ducati, Yamaha, Kawasaki. I mean, they choose their brand. They find their home. They tattoo it on themselves, right? Harley Davidson, and so they're just a different group. We're small, and we're a different group, and so I think we can't understand why other people can't connect, but some people look at them and they're like, that's so far from being approachable. So we have to look at it like Nabil was saying. How do you get them on the scooter, right? That's more important if we're talking about bringing new people into the fold. And like, I think that's happening. I think that's happening. It's becoming more, let's just say, approachable. We see more women riders today than we've had in the past, which is great. And so I think where the real growth is, that's why I say when we're talking about superbike, I think the real growth is in just what people want to buy. And if you talk to some of the new people coming in, they'll look over at this. Kawasaki's got a new bike called an Eliminator. It's 450 cc's. It's short. It's like a little chopper kind of thing, parallel twin. And I just love it. People look at it and they go, man, that is the coolest looking bike, right? And you go, oh. But I was saying earlier on in the conversation that we're these guys that have been around, and we've evolved into these lifeline motorcyclists that, if the bike doesn't have an IMU and 10 TC maps and 4 power modes and, engine braking and, stopped all on its own. And you're like, why would you buy anything other than that? Right. But these guys are just looking at, wow, that's the coolest looking thing ever. So, wow, this is fun to ride. So the industry goes through those cycles, right? And that's the cycle I think we're in right now. And
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you put your finger on like what you said was very astute. The three things that can move this industry is, one of them is obviously the more accessible bikes. Two I think the baggers actually is a good thing because if I can showcase a suspension that works on a Harley and I can target 500,000 Harleys in the US because it makes your bagger handle better or some bracket on the frame, then this is going to be gold because it's money for the industry, it gets attention, and that brings people into the fold. But because a Harley is intimidating, then you can get a smaller bike and then graduate into either a Harley or a sport. I started on Harleys, went into sports biking because I wanted a better performance bike. And I think the third thing, which I wish people did more intentionally, is this co-branding you talked about. Because you're right, getting an ad in mainstream media is expensive. But if I went and convinced every big fashion brand and cool brand name out there to say, hey, put your model on a motorcycle, male or female, instead of putting them in a car, and put some money that way, and maybe we supported 10-20% of the ad cost and they supported 80%. Now you get this association with a cool brand, but you're also making motorcycles cool again. And because somehow the industry needs to stop advertising to existing customers and get new customers in. And that's, I think, where it hurts a lot. But it's expensive, and I think you put your finger on the solution. We just need more of that.
Yeah. So the racing thing, was a byproduct of sales being great and manufacturers fighting for market share. And and right now we're sort of in that, we're in a different cycle. We're in a cycle of finding these new people and making it cool again. I mean, I don't know if you ever watch Happy Days, Fonzie and a Triumph. I mean,
Yeah.
that made that popular. The Bad News Bears was a movie where Kelly Leak had a dirt bike. I mean, as a kid growing up, I thought, man, that was the coolest thing. I got to have a dirt bike, right? And so those, Tom Cruise in Top Gun, and he puts the sport bike ninja on the map, right? And I can't think of all the different people that have come through that have done the Harley Davidson thing that have made it the bad boy image where guys want to look and feel and have all of that type of existence of in the motorcycle industry, right? So, or should I say, motorcycle experience. So, I think that's coming around, right? We got to find places for it, and I think it's happening, but I think these things take time. They take time. People have to grow into them.
And we have to
So
keep
that's
and we have to keep people that started. We have to keep them in the sport or into motorcycles and not have them, crash, break a leg or something, and then just get out and sell the bike. I think we lose a lot of people because of lack of education and showing them how to ride correctly and survive.
sure. Yeah, and they're not for everybody. That's for sure. Right, motorcycling is not for everybody, but
When
it
you
is.
see the way some people drive, people should not be near a car, let alone a motorcycle.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. It can be very intimidating to. I hear a lot of people say, "Well, I won't ride on the street," but I ride on the street every weekend. I enjoy it, and I ride to work when I can. So, yeah, and I think look, we got a lot of hot new models, right, that I think are bringing people to the marketplace. And so it's a really exciting time for me, I think, in the motorcycle industry.
Jack, you're the king of Willow. Take us through a lap of Willow Springs in a really fast pace. You start,
Really fast pace.
yeah, you start coming out of turn 9.
No, you don't start at 9. You
Oh,
go
really?
into 1, right? Right?
Well, okay, you started at
You go
1.
into 1 and you go into 1, and you got 3 rollers on your way in if you're on the outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's if you want the high line and you want to exit, early, or you have the low line. The low line's banked, and there's a nice rubber groove all the way to the curbing on the inside, and you'll have to come out high. So classic would be Curtis Adams and myself, crisscrossing there. Little straightaway between 1 and 2.
Wait, you have a patch. You have a patch on right between the apex of turn 1 and just a little inches to the right. Everybody kept telling me go between that patch, and I kept missing it.
Between one
And
and
turn
2.
1, yeah, turn 1 on the apex. There's a patch a few inches to the right, or there used to be.
I never hit the pinch.
Okay.
I would almost always take the low line.
Okay.
I think there was a lot more time to be had on the entry and when scrubbing the speed with the front down to the bottom. And the short shoot between there and two is pretty short. So if you took the high line and you had a lot more drive leaving, you just had to have to slow down more going on your way into two. So I always felt the low line was better and I could make more there. And I didn't have to accelerate as hard. And my bank, there's a lot more bank on that low part of turn one.
Okay.
Smoother too, easier on the tire.
Okay.
I never would see that patch.
Okay. Now how would you go into turn two? Would you go at the center of the racetrack? Would you go all the way to the left?
No, I'd swing it all the way to the left. Right. So I'd let it hang all the way to the right, all the way back to the left. Look, the track's pretty wide there, but if you come all the way to the left and you then come all the way back to the right at the entry, the track's got two grooves like this and a seam in the middle, right? So you drop in at the bottom, right? And then let the speed scrub off. As you go up the hill, you lose the bank, right? And then just let it run over the top of the seam. And right just on the outside of the seam had the best grip. But if you rode the outside of the seam, you left the hole open where somebody could come under if somebody was right beside you, they could drive up, squirt up the inside. The reason why I like to cross the seam is it was a little easier on the tire and you had a better approach exiting. So it was actually more fun too, because if you left it on the inside, you had to wait to open the throttle as you crested the top on the exit. And that's where there's a patch up at the top. And it's the two seams come together and then another seam. And right as you leave there is where you could get it lit up and drive it off the top of that crest, which is crest up and you could really just burn the tire. Let's let it hang off to the very outside back over to the left again as you head down the straightaway for turn three.
Now, would you sometimes double apex it, or would you just hug the curb into?
Well, that's kind of would really be the double apex, right? Okay. You drop down into the bottom, let it scrub the speed off across the seam, and then you pull it back down tight again, and run it up off the top. So that's the two apexes.
Okay, and then
that was probably the most fun. That was the funnest way around the track, right? That way is a little bit harder on the tire too, but that's okay. If it's not fun, then you could probably do just about the same lap time, just letting it run around the inside, but not nearly as exciting.
Okay, right? And turn three, you would go all the way to the right and then turn it straight in.
Well, turn three, you could do the same thing. There was a groove where you could really brake low. And over the years, there was a bump involved, or on entry on that low line. So you would almost be forced to go to the high line because you'd have to brake over that bump to really scrub the speed for the entry. But so it was I really liked the low braking line there, and I liked it because you had to pick it up right away and turn it into four, and you couldn't use the outside of four. The outside of four had way less bank and it was really, really bumpy. It had way less grip, so it really didn't matter trying to have a lot of exit speed out of three. It was always faster to scrub it on the inside, and it was banked. So as you scrubbed it, you'd still be slowing, and then you can flick it straight over into four and then hug the inside. Okay. That was fastest, safest way, I think, through there. The high line, you could get a little bit more speed, right? But there's a couple of rollers there too, braking rollers, and you had to kind of get up above those and turn it a little later. I think it was really a waste of time to try to go out that high.
Okay. And then you would go through 4, not go too high, 4B, and then how much would you drift towards 5? Would you drift all the way to the left?
Yeah, you really needed to do that. That's And the hardest thing for most people to understand is you needed to be patient, right? You needed to have the speed as you exited, and the track goes away. So you have to be patient on how much throttle you give, but you also can't be stagnant on the throttle as you run down towards 5, right? And you needed to use as much of the track on the exit, and then pull it all the way back over to the right again for 5. You really needed to do that.
Okay. And then
Now, if you didn't, your approach leaving 7 would be compromised. Let's say that, if you wanted to carry the speed. So we can go through these, and then you'll figure out why I'm saying that. But
now
so
would you
all the way to the left
yeah. No
for
no
me.
would you double apex on 6?
No, single apex 6.
Okay. And then you would go
Yeah.
straight up and then 7.
You had to bring it all the way back for 5, right? So all the way back to the right, and you had to turn where the banking was going away, right? So that it was downhill, and if you waited to turn when you got into the bank, right, that's down low where you could really get some G's, you'd be rushed to get to 6. You could do it that way and scrub speed if you were in a bad position or you made a mistake, and just let it run off into the bank there. But if you could hug the inside, you had a much better approach and a much smoother track and a shorter, straighter shot over the top of 6, right? And that was always the easiest way to get over it. And it was pretty exciting to do it that way. Get patient, the inside, turn it early, and get a straight shot over 6. And then it didn't matter where you were going, you could just wheelie all the way down the back straightaway.
You mean you could wheelie?
The fast motorcycle could wheelie down the back straightaway. And so that was pretty exciting. And from there, it didn't, yeah. So 8 was absolutely a corner there. Right? A lot of people think you just go through it, but there's absolutely a corner there. And there's high lines and low lines, but the low line is the right one. And they had rollers out there too, right? There's a couple of big rollers. And the closer you got to the inside, the smoother it was. So you try to get it over to the inside as far as you can, but you can't always make it there because the wind is blowing out there, and so it's a little bit of a safety margin too to be towards the inside, because you could miss by 3-4 feet just because the change in the gusts as you turn. Right as you turn, that would be the direction the wind would be heading,
especially in the afternoon.
Especially in the afternoon. Yeah, and it was it's gusty. It's not steady. It's gusty. So you get up over those 2 rollers, right? And you really, that's where you make big time at Willow, is not rolling off as you head in there. And that takes a lot of foresight, right? As to where you're going to be, because you're really moving when you get there. And you have a little short shoot after those rollers between 8 and 9. And then you could pretty much do just about anything you wanted there, right? As long as you made it to, there's a couple of cracks right in the track that you could see, but you couldn't see them until you got within, some distance of them. There's no cones, no markers, nothing. That's what you have, are a couple of cracks. And they would change as years would go on. And Bill would not let anybody go out there and spray paint the track. Otherwise, I would have been out there spray painting. And but as long as you could get out there somewhere in about 10 foot, you could find a place to turn it and have a run up the front straightaway, just about. And a little bit higher, had less of a dip, right? But you could go down into the dip if you needed to make a pass, right? Or if if you felt like you could, you had blown it and needed to shorten up the corner a little bit, you could do that. So that's a lap of Willow Springs.
From the king himself.
I'm the best. Yeah.
The way we used to train, I mean, this is a Keith Code thing, was to run the track through your mind, right? and use the stopwatch, not looking at the stopwatch, but use the stopwatch and do these laps through your mind, and then hit the stopwatch, and you do lap after lap, right? And you actually picture yourself in the race with, whoever your nemesis might be, right? And then you go back through the laps and you see how accurate you are to know how well you know the racetrack. We even evolved it later to, when you're exercising, doing the same thing. So you get the heart rate up, right? And while you're doing your run on the treadmill, of course, you're going through the laps and clicking them off. And so you really get to know the circuits well that way.
Visualization. Yeah, that's the best way.
Yeah. That was my training, right?
Yeah. So you were talking a bit earlier about the inability, more or less, to build the bike the way you would want to, and the rules that prevent you from building a great bike, right? And now pretty much everybody's on equal machinery, give or take. So manufacturers don't have this big opportunity to showcase the technology prowess. But it sounds, I mean, like, take us through what it takes to build a great team. Because when I started getting familiar, MotoAmerica restarted, and I started getting more familiar with road racing in the US. Braves bikes were the dominant team, and you guys just had everything right. And it sounded to me, being a newbie, that that's what it took now. It wasn't just you had a great bike and you had a great race. You had to have a great team. You have to have great logistics. Your engineers have to be able to communicate well with the racer to get the feedback, and the incremental changes in the bike were there. I mean, part of it was the magic, like, Gigi Dall'Igna he's known to be going through the rule book and figuring out where the loophole exists to create something that they didn't foresee in the rule book and then get an advantage. But it sounded also more like it's got to be a complete show. Everything's got to be right. And walk us through a little bit what it takes to build and run a great team, a winning team.
Well, it's you got to start with some money, right? That's right. There's a lot of pieces to that, right? And like any sports team, you have to have good flow with all the team players, right? So it's really no difference. Just the mechanics of racing is specific to maybe a class or a specific rider, right? All of those things are important, and making all those things flow. I don't know that you're right in saying that that's where it's evolved to, that the team matters. And the challenge is that's the most expensive part of this, is the manpower. Motorcycles are cheap, really, by comparison to a total budget. But the personnel and moving those personnel, especially professionals, that can get the job done. Because it's not a 5-minute job, right? This is when we were talking earlier, what it takes to go superbike racing. And I said, you got to have a 3-year deal to make it work. Well, that's because it takes time to bring all that together. It's not a, hey, I'm just going to write a check and do this, right? So knowing what you need to do, that takes somebody who has the experience and the understanding of what the rider needs to get around the circuit, more so today than anything else, right? Because it's become about the rider, or at least that part of it. Now, unfortunately, this seems to be the part that some of the folks that are spending the money have want to invest in the least, right? And so that's a challenge, because, right, that's a challenge. It's not, if you want professionals, you want professional racing, you can't be a hobby. And it's so, everything from nutrition when you get there to how the riders prepare and the crew prepares before they get there, or even how they finish a season, right? And whether they do anything with the information they learned all year or not. And right, there's so much to that, and that takes an organization to do it. So if there were some very specific things, areas that you wanted to know about, I could. But say, how can I explain to put a professional winning road racing team together? I'm going to need a lot more than a 2 hour podcast, right? I'll teach you everything I know in about 5 minutes, right? So it's an absolute art form to bring people together, as you know, in any organization, right? It's an art form to bring people together and keep them together. So
Yeah, in a sense, it sounds a lot. So I've been involved in a lot of startups on the technology side and software side, and it sounds a lot like this, right? And part of the job is fundraising. Part of the job is getting the right team together. Part of the job is now building the magic, the product that's actually going to get the demand. Well, in the racing case, the product that's going to win. And you're wearing all these hats, which makes it really difficult for a team founder or manager because everybody's counting on you to get all these pieces right. Ultimately, yes, the racer is a big part that everybody sees, but the manager is kind of the underrated part of the deal where you go, if they can do it right, then the magic happens. If they can't, you can get Marquez on your bike, like we're seeing right now with Honda, and he's not going to go anywhere.
and there's so much to it. You hit the nail right on the head, right? And fundraising is one thing. Think of what it takes just to satisfy your your contributors. That effort is not small. That takes full-time staff to satisfy when you go out and raise $6.5 million, you're going to need a guy just doing that, right?
Oh, yeah, we're going through
Yeah.
it right now. Well, where are your sales? Well, they're coming.
Right, right. So yeah, it's so yeah, professional motorcycle racing is a really cool thing. It's very exciting, and being able to do that, put all that together, and get guys, motivated and working as a unit, really self satisfying for sure, right? So, but it definitely takes serious resources, and when your resources are on that, say, for when you guys asked the question about would I go back and do it again, or if that opportunity was there, um, the amount of the things I've accomplished since we stopped doing professional racing in other areas of our business just could not have been done, right, at the same time as running a professional racing team. Because running a professional racing team is everything, right? There is no tomorrow because the race is tomorrow, right? And then when the race is over, you don't stop. It's not like you take a rest because the next race is coming up. Everything else goes on the back burner.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah.
say your catalog of products is much richer now than it was in the days where you were running your race team. So I took a
Yes.
look. I took a look at the website. You have thousands, right? Thousands of parts.
Yeah. And we add 2, 3 new products a week. So we're on the gas, and we've expanded those offerings, and it's very difficult manufacturing in the United States, but manufacturing in Los Angeles, California, somebody has to say, "You are crazy, son. What are you doing?"
You're
This is
crazy.
where I live. Yeah, I am. This is where I live. This is where my people are, right? And we do some stuff that nobody in America does, right? And we use all the finest grade materials, and we make sure the quality is the best. Right? If you've seen some of the titanium welding and the products that we output, I mean, we're a very small company and a really tight group, but we only put out the best stuff.
So what type of motorcycles do you manufacture for? And people that have those motorcycles, you can go to Graves Motorsports and figure out how to make your bike cooler, faster. So give us a rundown of just the manufacturers and models you have parts for.
Well, it'd be easiest just to focus on the guys that we're most focused on in performance right now today, and that's the Kawasaki brand. Um, so, but you may or may not know that there was, as this era came about with the balanced racing and fairness doctrines and this type of thing, about 2008, the Daytona Motorsports Group was coming in to take control of pro racing in America. AMA had put themselves in a bad financial position. Of course, so did a lot of people were in a bad financial position. And without the, let's say, without a vote of the members of the AMA, the board sold the rights to pro motorcycle road racing to a group called the Daytona Motorsports Group, which happens to be same guys that own ISC and NASCAR of France. So at that moment, they told us that they would, we're going to change everything, right? Every part's got to be homologated, and everybody gets to have the same stuff, and we're going to do spec tires, and we're going to change, make this the same for everybody. And so I thought, well, that's fine. You want to do it that way? Great. I love bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I'll sell everything we own. We'll give them the same stuff, right? Most guys won't do that. And the reason we will is for the same reasons Bill just asked me about what it takes to go winning, right? Because without that group, it doesn't matter. I can give you the best stuff, but you still got to manage it, right? So we've always felt like we prefer to sell the very best and give it to the guys. So that's when we started producing motorcycles and selling them and technically supporting them. And that was really successful. It was really successful for us. And actually, I started my company in the very earliest days making fairing brackets that only factory bikes had, right? This goes back to when I told you I took over that job as a professional rider. And so I had this time on my hands when we started the company. I started bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I looked at the fairing brackets on factory motorcycles and GSXRs, stock, big, heavy steel thing. The factory bikes had these really cool aluminum fairing brackets. So I started making them, selling them, and getting them to the consumer. And that was one of our first slogans was, look, that we sell what we race. And so we took it to the next level. We built a build list of every nut, bolt, and screw and schematic and said, look, everything's for sale. You tell us what you want to do. We'll change kits, everything. And we went down and that's when they were driving this into 600s for the Daytona 200, right? So that very next year for 2009. And we made a bunch of the kits, and it was, you can they gave us a really strict set of rules. And so that I'm a little off track here because you just want to know about the bikes that we built. But we decided at that time we would do the entire motorcycle, right? Let's nut, bolt, screw, all the factory, whatever the best stuff was. We'll help you. We'll show you how to use it. We'll sell you the spares, and we'll send you on your way. And a lot of guys won a lot of races on the stuff that we've provided. Fast forward to 2019, when we were no longer running the racing team with Yamaha, and we were at home. We wanted to expand that product line, and we chose the Kawasaki motorcycles. And so we started building Kawasaki brand bikes and offering those as well as the Yamaha platforms. And that became really successful. As a matter of fact, so successful, I'd like to take a little bit of credit for the acceleration of Kawasaki's movement from where they were at that era for sport bike sales in America to where they are now, which is number one. But we've built bikes that have won national championships that we've managed from home. In other words, for Richie Escalante in 2020, we built a Kawasaki ZX6, and we put the data on the bikes. We didn't send any of our technicians to the track. and we manage the data and the technical assistance over the phone and through the internet. And he won a national championship in most of the races, on a motorcycle that nobody else was even thinking about. And so that's been really successful for us today. And so today, the one that we're doing the most of is this new flagship bike, the Kawasaki ZX4RR, which is that new 4-cylinder inline, which just, if you get a chance, both of you, you've got to ride it, because I kid you not, it's the most friendly and inspiring motorcycle I've ridden in the last decade. Right, just a blast. And young, old, tall, short, female, male, experienced, not experienced, you're gonna love it. Just amazing bike to ride. You can ride it all day long, right? And it just doesn't wear you out, and it's exciting all the time. But so I'd say the Kawasaki brand of products. The other thing that we've really expanded on is dual sport and adventure, right? Adventure is a little slow. Adventure guys, they don't quite accessorize as much, but dual sport has really had a lot of growth. Single track, I don't know if you know, if you've done any single track, but we love single track. That's kind of goat trails up through the mountains, picking your way through it. And those same guys are doing the dual sport stuff. They're riding to the events. There's really a lot of growth we see in those areas. Let me tell you this. I went to a dual sport, kind of what you call a dual sport rally or an event in Kernville last April. I think it was April, right? Or this April, 23. And there was 300 entrants at this event, which was more than like a lot of, or I would say comparable to a lot of road races, right? And other events. So there's 300 entrants. They came with all their family, the guy and his wife, and the girls were riding too, and the kids were there. But there'd be 300 of them just for the actual rides, and they had multiple different levels. So that's an area that's got a lot of growth. So we because we love it, we're really highly involved in making cool products for that. So yeah, I would say those are the things that we're doing.
Okay, so basically, quitting racing was the best thing that ever happened to your company.
Yeah, well, probably from the company standpoint, I would say absolutely, right? It's given us a lot of, and I'm not saying quitting racing. I love racing. We want to go racing.
I'm just trying to get you all rounded up so you can come
Yeah.
Get him back in.
Yeah.
What do you think about?
So what's your website, Chuck, where people can purchase the parts?
Gravesport.com. That's one S. GravesPort.com.
What do you think about MotoGP? Any predictions for next year? What is Marquez going to do in Ducati?
Yeah, I think he's a great rider, right? My prediction for MotoGP, I'm taking this from a little bit of a scam back, but I got some real concerns about it. A good friend of mine, Mike Trimby, who's really, I would say, the guy who brought the Grand Prix to where it is today. And he was the leader of Herrin. And I think he's responsible for making most of the racetracks around the world safe, right? Him directly, and for the teams being as strong as they are financially, and for the rules being part of what they are. I mean, he's just a great man, right? And with a lot of passion and a big understanding of Grand Prix racing. I don't really know a lot of the other folks over there, but with his passing, I'm deeply concerned that that power shift, right, is not, that his position is not filled by another Mike Trimby, which I don't see that there'll be a lot of changes, right, for the teams and riders. I could be wrong, right, but I suspect that some level not have the same separation from the organizer and from the the tech guys from the FIM. In other words, I think the balance of FIM, Dorna, and IRTA are part having three power pieces. Not that FIM is really much of a power piece, or more of just a, I don't know, they just get kicked around by Dorna probably anyways. But I I I I fear that triangle's broken now. So we probably won't see any effect of that for some years to come, right? But so if we were just talking about racing, wow, that's changed a lot, hasn't it? Right? It has really changed a lot. It's almost all Ducatis and KTM's now, and the Japanese manufacturers seem like they're still in it, but only two, Honda and Yamaha, right? So Suzuki's out. Kawasaki's not gone back in. It's kind of and I've always kind of been a Japanese motorcycle guy, right? I know the European dudes make some really cool stuff. I love their product. But I really like the Japanese product just for a lot of its reliability and the sharp edges knocked off of them, right? And they're everyday machines, right? You can always count on them starting up and going. I shouldn't say like the other guys are less reliable, but they're just sharp edges.
I think you nailed it, and they're also more affordable.
They're more affordable, and they're actually they don't over accessorize them for those reasons, and so they leave a lot of room open for the aftermarket, and that's really important to motorcycling because that drives more energy into it. When you take the aftermarket out, you just shrink the size of the box. So that's the other reason I think I really like the Japanese manufacturers. So I don't know. It's a little bit sad, honestly, to see. And I don't see Valentino Rossi. I don't even see it. I love Mark Marquez. I think he's a really special dude. And as a matter of fact, I like all the riders are just amazing guys, right? But I don't see Valentino Rossi. And that's a little bit of a concern for me. Everybody just seems so much the same, right? There isn't a.
People say it's because of the wings. There's not enough passing. People can't showcase what they have or don't have, and the bikes are just they're just there. They're just hanging in there. It's just not a lot of passing, and they need to make them a little bit looser to figure out who's the best rider.
Yeah, maybe British Superbike guys got it right.
No electronics.
I mean, well, I guess maybe they got it right. Maybe that's better. I mean, MotoGP is certainly exciting and great racing and a great event. I don't know about the sound because when you go there, it's painful to be there all day, even with earplugs, right? But so they got a great show. I don't know. It's gotten too just generic, I guess. Right? I don't know. And again, I love it. I like Moto2 a lot, and I guess because I got an American to root for. Joe Roberts is a good friend of mine, and I love to watch when he does well. So just because it's somebody you can connect with.
So I'm taking your comment about no Valentino Rossi more from a personality perspective than a race capability perspective. And
correct.
It seems they've tamed down everybody into this generic, watered down, good corporate citizen.
Right.
And yes, they're professional, they're great racers, but there's no larger than life personalities anymore because they're afraid of saying something. I mean, sometimes we go to the MotoGP after parties, and they don't want to be taken in a picture with a drink in their hand. Mm-hmm. So you go and say, let's take a selfie. They got to put the drink down, and because it's not proper to have alcohol. And I'm going like, well, at what point do you neuter it when it becomes so bland that there's no excitement and nobody wants to watch it? Yes, it's great to see sports people perform, but people want the drama around it, like Gibberno and Rossi and Lorenzo and Rossi, and you don't see. I mean, there's competition, but it's not the same level of drama and excitement that there used to be.
Right. Yeah. But every one of those guys has to be so good because the machines are all so close and the teams are all so close. But you have to be so good every time that there is no room for any of that stuff to happen anymore. And so it's almost taken some of the specialty out of it, let's say, right? There's there's no Kevin Schwantz, right?
There's no Barry
If I looked
Sheen.
at it from a writing,
Barry
yeah,
Sheen.
no Barry Sheen. Yeah, so, but I didn't really start watching when Sheen was a guy. I came in after, but when I watched, if I look at the events where Kevin Schwantz was at, it was always the most exciting to watch on track. And of course, there was always the fun guys off track, right? Or the personalities like Rossi. So it's a little, I don't know about MotoGP. But the one thing I do know is that MotoAmerica, with all of the things they do have going on, I really like their where you can see the events and things about it all the time. In other words, their digital package, right, and how it's pushed out is really pretty cool, right? And if they just, I think some new stuff, they need some different stuff in there, as far as from the competition side of it, I think. Like baggers, I mean, I love watching the baggers race, right? It's great racing, right?
Yeah, same with the
and you can
Royal
see it.
Enfields.
Yeah, I don't know so much about the Royal Enfield. That didn't do much for me, but that could be really cool
It's
depending
for the
on.
female audience. Those are all women.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's for.
Yeah.
Well, no, but
Yeah.
that's special.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody's got that segment, that they really dig, right?
Yeah, my
Like
girlfriend
some people might
knows
just wanna
almost
watch
nothing
junior
about. Yeah, my girlfriend knows almost nothing about motorcycles, and I turned on the TV and I said, "Look, those are women racing," and she stayed and watched it.
So get this, the same thing for me. You know who Kayla Yakovich is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm watching. We built a bike for Stefano Mesa this year, and so Stefano had some great rides, but their cycle guys pulled him off to fill in for Beaubier because Beaubier was going to take a pass on the second half of the season or last few rounds. He'd had some injuries, right? And that bike came available, and they put put Kayla on that. The last race of the year at New Jersey, Saturday's race, she came from 13th on the grid, way back. And this is in the rain, right? So there's no, she had any, whatever. She rode the wheels off that ZX6. And it's another lap, she'd have won the race. And I just the look in the guy's eyes on the podium when they went, what? She's here. And I'm sure their crew chiefs were telling her she was coming because she'd had another lap, she'd have won the race. I don't know if you saw. But that's what I mean about MotoAmerica's package. Their TV stuff is really good, right? And so I whether I don't like balanced racing or it doesn't fit in the financial or the business model for us today, that doesn't matter. Their at least their TV package is really, really cool. So I'm hoping we can do more stuff like that where we can help people like that, and they ride on equipment so we can have some connection with it. And I hope that group can really make a go of what they're doing here with the resources that they have, because I think it's really difficult for them to do what they're doing, especially with the direction sport bike's headed.
Yeah. That was a good
Sorry,
move,
I didn't
think,
need to get off the
on behalf of
MotoGP thing.
MotoAmerica.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
worries.
What's that?
I'm saying I think it was a really good move on MotoAmerica because the bagger crowd is much larger than the sport bike crowd, so they're attracting a lot of eyeballs that way. And then the women's racing gets women potentially interested. So they're doing some smart things. Hopefully, they'll expand the audience here, and then people will buy more motorcycles again.
I think they will. I think they're making some. Like I said, I think they're making a lot of good decisions in that respect. And that drags a lot of people to the industry. So.
Hey, Nabil, remember when we said we're only going to do an hour on the podcast?
Yes. Yeah, we're doing really well with that goal.
Where are we at now?
2.5
Oh, an hour.
hours.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh. I'm here at this open
Time
house right
flies.
here. I'm here at this open house for Magnum Motorsports in the Valley, and I've been 2.5 hours up here in their office, sitting down there mingling.
They're outside going
We
like,
should
what,
we
what,
should
what is he
probably let
doing?
you go
Yeah.
do that.
No, 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 it's good. It's good. I'm having a great time. It's
Yeah.
great to talk motorcycle.
We
Right?
can do a part two, but right now let's just ask the last question. You want to ask it, Nabil?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So you're in Van
Oh, this is a
Nuys.
trick question.
Yeah, you're in Van Nuys. It's a trick question.
Yeah.
Tommy's Original Burgers, Bob's Big Boy, which is a little bit to the east of you, or the Habit. And think carefully before you answer.
Okay, now does it have to be where I would absolutely get my next burger from, or which one do I remember being the best?
Which one is the best?
Okay, so Bob's Big Boy,
Okay.
Brawny beef burger. I don't even know if they sell them anymore, but when my dad would take us on Sundays after church, we all went to Bob's Big Boy afterwards, and everybody else would have breakfast. I would have the brawny beef burger. I haven't had one since I was 12.
So
So
there you have it. I'm sure you pissed off a few people, but that's the
why?
answer.
Who? Why? Because they thought why?
I would have taken the Habit, and I know a lot of people
Really?
that would taken Tommy's Burgers, but the debate will rage on.
It will rage on because you know where I had my last burger?
Where?
In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger on Balboa and Sherman Way, right where the old Bob's Big Boy used to be. It's on the way from my office back to my house. Double.
Yeah, that's a
Tommy's.
inevitable meal in LA.
Yeah, yeah. You know the thing about Tommy's, to get to Tommy's, I would have to go all the way down and around because I can't go straight up Haskell. It's blocked off. So I'd either have to go up to Sepulveda and go around to get onto Roscoe, right? Unless there's another Tommy's I'm not aware of, or I'd have to go back up Woodley and go away from my home to get to Tommy's.
Yeah,
That's
if
the
I go
only
up,
reason I didn't choose Tommy's.
if I go up Sepulveda, I'm never going to get there. I'm just going to stop at Dr. Hoggly Woggly.
Oh yeah, Dr. Hoggly Woggly's. Yeah, right. Texas Tyler Barbecue. Right. Yeah. And the Valley. A lot of good food in the Valley if you get to the right places.
Yeah.
I think Gal's wet dream is to start a food podcast soon.
My wet dream is
Is what?
Go. Oh, my wet dream is to make a lot of money so I can go back to the Valley.
you know, you gotta have a lot of money to live here.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
I know.
Expensive.
It really, you need to. Yeah,
I know.
That's no joke. Well, they're having hamburgers here,
Okay.
so I'm gonna have a hamburger here. That's
So
gonna be my next
we're
burger.
gonna let you go,
Okay.
and we should
Thanks
we
so
should
much
do
for
we should do a part two because we have so many more questions.
absolutely.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
let me know when.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great,
So
great
let's
meeting
remind
you,
everybody
gentlemen.
to check out Grave Sport for all the cool parts and performance parts for your bikes.
Yeah.
And a lot of expanding catalogs. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Congratulations, Chuck.
All right. Thank you so much.
And
All
thank
right,
you
gentlemen.
guys.
Have a great day.
You too. And thank you
All
guys
right.
for listening.